Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. This is session number 4 of our Kabbalah class. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you guys and learning with you and teaching. As I've said in the past, this is sort of my passion, and so it's a huge pleasure for me to be able to share it with people. So thank you all for giving me this opportunity and for being here and learning with me. And I'll add to that when I was studying for my doctorate at the Jewish Theological Seminary, my specialty was Jewish magic, what's called Kabbalah Ma'asit, or practical Kabbalah. And I didn't end up finishing my doctorate. I did do all my coursework, and some of my exams, but I did not end up getting my doctorate, but I still have a very deep passion for Jewish magic. So we're going to be talking today about that, and I'm just so happy to be able to share what I've learned with all of you. I want to start with a chant that we learned in the last class. For those of you who weren't here, it's really easy. It's just 5 vowels. And I want to use this Indian instrument called a shruti box, which is used for Vedic chanting, and it's used for also sort of teaching Indian singing. And it just plays a simple chord. And so what we'll do is we'll use this. So we're going to use this, and what we're going to do is we're going to do the Abulafian chanting meditation, which we learned in the last class. And basically what that is, I'll write it out on the board so you have it. It's moving through the 5 vowels. If we were going to get more complex about it, we would add consonants to the vowels, but we're just going to use the basic vowels. And it's O, A, E, E, and U. And we'll chant each one and take a breath in between each one. And when we say O, if you feel comfortable, lift your head up like this and bring it down. When you say A, turn your head to the right and then to the middle. So to the right. When we say turn your head to the left and then to the middle, like that. When we say E, put your head down and then up again. And when we say U, it's just like this. Ooh, ooh, like that. Welcome. Make sure to sign the attendance sheet. Rabbi Eddie wants to make sure that we have everybody's names. So we'll go through this, the 5 vowels 3 times, and then sit in silence for maybe about a minute, if people are comfortable with that. And then I'll offer a blessing for Torah study, and then we'll begin. Okay. If you're comfortable, close your eyes. If not, that's fine. Ah Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truth, from the arrogance that thinks it has all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Amen. So we're going to start. I'd like to just go around and give people a chance to speak a little bit at the beginning and then sort of loosen people up so that you can speak later on as well during the class. So my question for today that I'd like you to answer as we go around is, what superstitions do you have, if any? Or have you had in your life, if any? Even though you might know with your rational mind that they're not logical. Or what superstitions have you seen other people have? I can say that as well. I'll start. I'm Rabbi Ben, and I still say Kenahara 222. It's a good thing, right? There's something about it for me, you know. I don't know why. It's just sort of my lizard brain, but I still do that. So, would you like to go next?
Oh boy. I'm Jim, I think. The only one, I guess, sort of superstition that I have is that before I work in the morning, I can drink stuff, but I don't eat. I have to work first for a while before I can eat. Otherwise, I think I'm not going to work well.
My name is Stephanie. I'm trying to think. I know I do believe in fate, and like if you're walking down a block, there's some reason why you walk down that particular block, but I can't think of superstition.
Something specific.
Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
I'm I'm Erica, and I try not to be superstitious because I'm much too practical and realistic. But the Kamanahara really works for me, and the poo-poo as well. That's really, you reminded.
Even the most rational of us.
I can't help it. I mean, I guess somebody will say something, you know, I'm going to do such and such big deal, and I'll say, poo, 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 you know. That's a superstition. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm Hope. And also, of course, I do poo-poo-poo this way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's
Poo-poo this way.
so my mother did it. And I have a feeling I do it to be close to my mother. I don't really think it's getting rid of the evil eye or anything, but I...
It's interesting. You know, my daughter saw me doing it. You know, she sees me doing it, you know, and she said, at one point I said, well, it doesn't really do anything. She said, well, why do you do it, Dad? And I said, well, it kind of makes me feel better, you know.
But it connects you to your forebears, in a way.
Yeah.
I'm Joanne, and since we're on that theme, every time my grandchildren sneeze, I say Zygazut. And my mom says it, my grandmother said it, and it's just continuing the tradition.
Right. Just saying bless you to a sneeze. You ever say bless you to somebody who sneezes? There you go. That's a superstition. Right?
Yeah, no, I've always said that when I was a kid. Right.
Well, but look at the words that it is. Bless you, right?
Exactly, I never
Right.
thought of it. Right. I say gesundheit.
Isn't that also similar meaning, right? Good health.
Hi, I'm Alan, and I was going to say I don't believe in any superstitions, but I do say God bless you.
There you go. Thank you.
My name is Erica. I don't think I have too many superstitions, but I do try to avoid buying tickets in the 13th row of a theater. And I particularly become upset if we happen to end up with a row 13 on an airplane. That's a
In Judaism, 13 is actually a lucky number.
That's right.
Yeah. It's got the opposite meaning. For Bar Mitzvah 13, and they say in Keter, the highest Sphira, there are 13 attributes of compassion within Keter.
Also, I check in buildings to see if there's a 13th floor. If I'm going up in the elevator, I go, oh, that's good that this building doesn't have a 13th.
Many buildings do.
Yes.
That's true. That's true.
They all do, but they don't call it the
That's very good.
That's true.
I'm Max, Kanahara for sure, or depending on the company I'm in, it might be touch wood, which to me has the same significance.
Thank you.
I'm Mike, and I have a bunch of superstitions, but some I think are just that create a mindset or an intent. So I believe in talismans and symbols. I also believe you have to pray in Hebrew, which is a superstition, because God must understand all languages.
But here's why I have to bring it to you. Because for so many years and thousands of years, those words have sent their energies out so that the energies of those words can move more readily through the realms.
I never thought of that, Hope. Good thing you mentioned it. Can I just say something else?
Well, according to Kabbalah, God created the world with Hebrew, and Hebrew is the language that undergirds all of existence. So everything has Hebrew, and actually that gets towards magic, right? Which is like if you can find the right words and move around the words in the right ways, you can actually alter reality. You were going to say?
Because you're talking about superstitions. I think this is a very Jewish thing, because we're doing a course with Bob Seltzer, Polish Jewry and all that.
Yeah.
And I think it comes out of the core of Jewish life in Poland, became Russia, but whatever. It's a very Jewish thing, the superstition, because people were afraid they needed to do something to appease God to make it all work. So, and it comes from that. So we're left with it only because our mothers, grandmothers, whoever did, poo, it's like knock on wood. And it doesn't, I don't think of it as superstitious at all. It's a custom. I don't knock on wood. I shouldn't, because it means you're knocking on the cross. So poo is what I do.
A little salt over the left shoulder. Right. So I want to start with a couple of stories. I like telling stories. So this story comes from Penina Schramm, who's a very famous Jewish storyteller. And it's a story about her telling stories. So she tells a story that she was once giving a lecture, stories about superstitions, just like this lecture that I'm giving today. And she was talking about all sorts of superstitions like poo and the salt over the left shoulder and all sorts of things like that, or the superstition that, for example, you would say, "Oh, what an ugly child that is," right? If a child is born so that they wouldn't become ugly, right? So right?
Oh no, so that the evil forces wouldn't be jealous. That's
Right, exactly. That too. Right. So and so she went off and she was talking about all of these different superstitions, including that one about what an ugly child, and this man came up to her afterwards, and he was practically in tears. And she said, "What is it?" And he said, "This lecture opened my eyes, because I always thought that my mother hated me. And once I've heard this lecture, I realized that she didn't hate me, that she actually loved me." And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, my mother always used to say, 'You're not my child. You're not my child. I sold you to the neighbor. You're not my child. I sold you to the neighbor.'" And he said, and I always thought it was just, she disapproved of me, and she didn't like me, and she was just being mean to me. But I realized, I thought about it, and once you're giving this lecture, I heard the lecture, I remembered that my mother lost 2 children before me, and they both died. And so she was afraid that she would lose me too. And so she developed this superstition that she could sell me to the neighbor, that I would kind of not be taken by the forces of evil. And I realize now that what she said was actually her expression of love for me, and that she really loved me. And so I think that's one little piece of insight about the way that our superstitions work as Jews, that we kind of say things that we don't mean in order to make sure that those things don't happen, right? So then I want to tell another story, which is from Aleister Crowley, who is not Jewish. He was an early 20th century occultist. Well, proto-Wiccan, before Wicca existed, right? There was a religion called Thelema, right? And the Golden Dawn was his sort of organization. They would study, sort of esoteric texts, including Kabbalistic texts. And he was asked once how to define magic, or what magic is, because he said that he was a practitioner of magic, which is what I'm talking about today. And he told this story, and I might have told this story in an earlier session, but I think it bears repeating. So 2 men are on a train. One man has what looks like a box on his lap, and it's covered with a cloth. And the other man is looking at this man with the box on his lap the whole train ride. And they're going, and he keeps looking at him. He's just wondering, what's in that box? And finally, he just can't help himself anymore. And he goes and he asks the man, he says, "What's in that box? You have this box, this box covered by a cloth. What are you holding in that box?" And the man said, "Well, in order to answer that, I have to tell you a story." And he said, okay. It's a very Jewish way of being, stories within stories, right? And he said, the story is that my brother was in the war. And while he was in the war, he fell into a pit full of snakes. And he was in the pit full of snakes for 24 hours until finally they fished him out of this pit full of snakes. And ever since then, he's had this delusion that snakes are crawling all over him all the time. And I'm going to visit him right now in the hospital where he's being kept. And I'm hoping to fix him. And he said, well, how are you hoping to fix him? He said, well, that's what's in the box. It's a mongoose. There's a mongoose in the box. And the man said, well, but aren't they imaginary snakes? And the man pulls the cloth off, and it's an empty box. And he says, well, this is an imaginary mongoose. Right. And according to Aleister Crowley, magic is the imaginary mongoose. Right. And so you can tell in a certain way where that leads, right? That there are certain ways of affecting our psychology and our minds, right? There are things that are in our minds and ways of thinking and delusions that we might have, and ways that our body might be affected by our minds, or the world might be affected by our minds. And magic is sort of a way to trick the mind into doing something different or thinking in a different way, right? Back to the Kinahara 222, right? It stops you from thinking those negative thoughts, right? In a way, it's like, okay, now the negative thought is dispelled, right? But and it does have a significant effect. If you're constantly thinking negative thoughts and the thoughts are not going away, that has an effect on you and on your body and on your attitude towards life and on everything, right? It raises your anxiety level. Right, and so by saying Kananahara 222, by doing some of these superstitious or magical acts, we are able to kind of trick our minds and lower our anxiety level and change sort of the way that we view reality. So that's my take, is sort of the Aleister Crowleyan take on magic and what the deeper meaning behind magic is. But I want to go through some specifics and some of the elements of Jewish magic and what does it mean to say Jewish magic, especially when it says in the Torah that you should not tolerate a sorcerer or a witch, and that you shouldn't allow that, and that magic is forbidden.
Does it say that specifically?
It's well, the wording is actually very specifically about certain kinds of magic, right? And the way
that were going on elsewhere,
right, other cultures, and the way the Talmud, the rabbis in the Talmud who were they did a lot of magic. And I'll bring some of the stories of the magic that they did today. What the rabbis of the Talmud did was they basically said, oh, in the Torah when it says you shouldn't do magic, it's referring to a very specific kind of magic, which means, and they say it's these two kinds of magic called Ov and Yidoni, where you invoke the dead, and I think in a wider context though. It's a prohibition against praying or worshiping these other forces. The rabbis would completely accept that these forces existed, and they even accept. There's a wonderful story I'll tell today about King Solomon. Who used a demon to build the temple. They even accept that you can use these forces, demons, angels, spirits, for your own purposes, as long as you realize that God is the supreme ruler of all of creation. So I want to hand out this. I put together a little packet because none of the books that we bought actually have Jewish magic. And I want to start by just giving you a definition and writing down. Oh, there goes the shooting box. Writing down some terms. So first of all, Jewish magic is, in Hebrew, it's Kabbalah Ma'asit. Which means practical Kabbalah. Now there are many different kinds of Kabbalah, right? Last week we sort of focused on meditative Kabbalah, meditation techniques within Kabbalah. The Zohar is what's called theosophical Kabbalah, meaning like talking about the Godhead and all of the different technicalities within the Godhead. There's ecstatic Kabbalah, which is related to the meditative, which was what Abraham Abulafia practiced, or prophetic, sometimes it's called. There's ethical Kabbalah, which is looking at all of the different sfirot, and that'll be the next session. We'll be talking about that, looking at all the different sfirot and seeing how they actually represent different ethical, moral qualities within ourselves, which is, it's a completely different thing than practical Kabbalah, right? It's a completely different universe.
What's the one under these?
Ecstatic or prophetic.
Okay.
So there's theosophical, there's prophetic, there's ethical, and there's practical. And practical is pretty much synonymous with magic, right? It's things like creating golems, invoking angels, invoking demons, creating amulets that are good for certain purposes, doing what in effect are magic spells. And now, have people gotten this down who wanted it? So this brings me to another definition, which is, they don't call them spells, they call them segulot, which means like treasured things. Segulot, or refuot. Segulot, refuot. There are other words like niflaot, which mean wonders. Refuot means healings, healing, things that heal. Treasured things. So they don't, strictly speaking, call it magic. They'll use these other words for it. Just a note also, though, about the English of the word spell. Right, a magical spell comes from the word spelling, right? It's the same word, right? And in Jewish magic, it's sort of the same idea, is that you use language to alter reality. And most magical spells, most segulot or refuot, mostly it's segulot, have an element to them that is language based. You'll invoke some force, you'll say somebody's name, an angel's name. And the idea is also, if you know the name of some angel or demon, you'll have power over them in a certain way. Right? So that's, I think, probably why they use the word spell for spells. So there's segulot, there's refuot, there's nistarot. There are all sorts of different words for what they do. I guess another really important one would be kameot, which means amulets. And so these are some of the words that they use for what you do when you do Jewish magic. Any questions, comments on anything I've said so far? Great. So let's begin by looking at page 7. So you'll see here on top it says, there's a quote here from Exodus that they quote, "Thou shalt not tolerate a sorceress to live." Right? And that's what I mentioned before. That's Exodus 22:17. And if you look at the bottom of the page here, it says forbidden practices. So anybody want to read these forbidden practices?
Any act which is performed without divine or related supernatural aid. In other words, any act which does not rely in some way on the power of God and or his creations, for example, his angels. Anything which produces a material effect solely by means of the performance of an act, such as transmuting one thing into another. Moses' staff becoming a snake would in my mind be an exception, since that was a divine act. God made this happen and personally directed Moses' actions in attempt to sway the Pharaoh. This was also known as manipulating the inner nature of a thing. Inappropriate use of the divine to do harm, serve greed, or to blatantly defy nature. For example, the Baal Shem Abu Aaron was chastised for using holy names to make a lion turn his mill after the lion ate his donkey. Not because he used magic or called on God's power, but because it upset the natural order of things. A lion is not meant to do such a thing.
So I just want to pause here. So this is one person's opinion from this particular source. This is one of the websites I sent you all to look at. I have a different take on it, having looked at some of these texts. I can show some of you. I can pass around. I have like an example of one of these magical texts I can just pass around. But I've looked through some of these magical texts, and there are first of all there are things that say, spells for killing your enemy. There are spells for making a lot of money. If you guys want to know that one, it's very easy. No, I won't tell you that. But anybody want it here? No.
Go for it.
Okay, so you want a lot of money. You take the tongue of a frog, you dry it out, and you keep it in your pocket.
Oh, simple.
Yeah,
Okay.
Frog's tongue.
Just go get a frog.
and that works.
I don't know if any of it works, right? What's interesting though is the frog. Right, this is what something that's called sympathetic magic, right? Which is that the quality of the animal is supposed to translate to you when you use that animal. So when I lived in Japan, they used to have this tradition where they would give you a little ceramic frog that you would keep in your wallet to make money.
Huh.
And what is it? Well, I think it's that the frog's tongue is sticky.
Oh, so grab.
Right? And so it grabs things, right?
It's symbolic.
Right.
There's no regal symbolism behind
Yeah,
it.
it's just symbolic.
No regal symbolism. No, but it's more, I think it's more like that a frog has a sticky tongue, and so that it'll stick to you, right? So I would say that in many of these books, which once the Jewish Theological Seminary Library is finished being renovated, we could all make a trip there together. But they have a rare book room there, or they did have a rare book room there, where they have all these texts. And if you look through these texts, there are spells for all sorts of things. And it's interesting to think about what the people who wrote these spells or collected these spells needed, right?
Can
so
I ask you something?
Sure.
I hate to interrupt.
No, please.
I love to interrupt, but
No, interrupt. Go ahead.
I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Who developed this? Which one of our sages developed this? Where in heaven's name is this coming from? Other than Buddhism or something else? I mean, this is so un-Jewish.
It comes directly from the Talmud. It comes directly from the Talmud, and
Directly from the reinterpreting the
there are spells within the Talmud. I have texts here in this packet that are directly from the Talmud. We're going to read tonight. They created a golem in the Talmud.
the golem. I know about the golem.
The golem, you know,
but that was
they
an aberration.
they evoked demons in the
but
Talmud.
That's an aberration. This was just not.
It's throughout. It's littered throughout the Talmud. It's there. It's
But
all.
it's the good old Jewish tradition of Baba mitzvahs.
That could be part of it too, right? But so there was, especially in the medieval and early modern time, there were these people called Baalei Shem, which I think I should also write down.
Now, I know we have the bunch, so.
Baalei Shem means masters of the name. Baal Shem Tov. Yes. So Baalei Shem means masters of the name, and these were people who knew these spells, these segulot, and you would go and you would visit them, and they would help you. And they were sort of like, it was like folk medicine too, right? They had herbology, right? They could prescribe you herbs for different things. One of the biggest things that they had a concern, and many of these texts have many spells for this, which is baldness. They were very concerned about baldness. And there are many spells also to avoid conscription.
Huh.
Interestingly enough.
That was a big deal.
That was a big deal for them too. And then another interesting thing that I noted from looking through all of these books of Segulot is there are a couple that have spells to create love, and it says between a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman.
Interesting.
So maybe they were actually doing that, but I don't know. Anyway, so Baalei Shem, they would go around, they would collect these segulot in the books, and they would write them out by hand. They would keep like a journal, and then they would visit different towns, and they would provide healing. They were like doctors. They were like the doctors of the time, right? And so the Baal Shem Tov, who's the founder of Hasidism, most people translate his name as Master of the Good Name. Right, because Shem Tov means good name. But actually it's Baal Shem Tov.
Of the good.
The good master, the good master of the name, the good wizard. For want of a better term. Right, that was the Baal Shem Tov was actually the good wizard. Right, it had nothing to do with him being a master of a good name.
And he was excommunicated, so you understand why I have reservations.
If he was excommunicated, then we'd have to tell Chabad down the corner that they shouldn't be doing their Torah, or having the Maccabees concert that they had last week, which was a fabulous concert.
A big parade through the streets.
They did. They had a big parade through the street with their new Torah. Right. So that's the Baal Shem Tov. But yes, it's very much opposed to sort of the rationalist strain of Judaism, which is very clearly there. It goes all the way back to Maimonides, right? Maimonides hated this sort of stuff. You know, he was not a proponent of superstition or magic in any sense, and he was even against astrology, which many rabbis were completely okay with. And not only that, there were many rabbis who were astrologers. That being said, in the Talmud it says "Ein mazal Yisrael," which means there's no fate for Israel. There's no constellations for Israel. Meaning that if you believe in the one God that's beyond space and beyond time, you kind of aren't bound by astrological signs. Anyway, so you're right. You're right about it. There definitely being a strain of Judaism that is against this. At the same time, there's a strain of Judaism that completely, does this. As many of us know, right? There's a story that my father tells about his mother, that she used to have epilepsy, or like seizures, I don't know if it was probably just seizures when she was young, and they went to her cousin who was a Rebbe, and he said, according to my father, now it might just be another Baba Maisa, but he said, dress her in white until she complains that she's wearing white and all the kids are making fun of her, and then open the first floor window and throw her out the window, and then she'll be okay. And according to my father, they did it, and she didn't have a seizure ever again, right? So
They throw her out the window?
they threw her out the window. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if the story's true or not.
Demonstrated on the ground floor.
Right. All this being said, like, you know, these Baalei Shem did these things, right? They went around, and I don't think if they were not successful some amount of the time, they wouldn't have been hired. You know, people paid them to make these spells for them, or to create amulets. I think it's a human nature, though. I think, you know, there's that rational part of us.
You want to believe. You do want to believe. This is what you want to do.
Yeah, there's the rational part of us, but then there's also the part of us that's kind of the lizard brain. Right? There's a great story about Mordecai Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism. And he was a real rationalist. He was a Litvak. He was a Lithuanian Jew, and he was very rationalist. And, you know, he didn't believe in any superstition, or, you know, for him, God was goodness. And I have a mentor of mine, Emmanuel Goldsmith, who was his student. And he said, you know, one day he was walking down the street with Professor Kaplan, with Rabbi Kaplan, and they like almost got hit by the car, and they didn't, and he said something like, oh, you know, oh, thank God, or like he like prayed, and Emmanuel Goldsmith was like, well, I thought you didn't believe in all that, and he said, well, you know, right. So even the most rational of us have. That's why I posed that question to all of you. Right, we all have sort of that lizard brain, and we can use it. Our rational minds can use these little tricks to calm down our lizard brain, right? So let's get into some.
I can tell you an interesting story.
Go ahead.
Because it's part of every culture, and I have some dear friends who are priests and babalaos in Santeria. And when I went in for surgery, King says, Mike, I want you to do this with your wife. You're going to do this little play. And he gave me some popcorn, and he gave me some rocks. He said, put them in your pocket, and your wife is going to be the tiger or the spirit that's threatening you, and she's going to come, and you're going to tell her, you're very strong, and you shouldn't fool with me. And you see these rocks, and then put them in your pocket, take the popcorn, eat them. See, I could even eat rocks and scare the bad spirits away. It was something that he felt I should do to assure a good outcome for surgery.
That's interesting. You know, there's a story about Herschel of Ostropol, who is a famous sort of Baal Shem and a funny character in stories. A lot of the time, he's sort of a trickster character. And the story about how he got rid of these demons, these goblins from a town. And one of the ways he got rid of the goblins was he took an egg, a hard-boiled egg, and he said, this is a stone, and I'm so strong that I can crush it, you know, and he crushed the egg in his hand, you know, and whatever. So it's a similar kind of idea, right, to the eating the popcorn, eating the stone.
I actually saw one of these things being performed in Bhutan. We were at this small temple, and the brother of the lama of that temple was very sick. And he'd been in bed for a long time. And they got this woman, very small, old woman, who came with a fire thing that she had roasted barley on. And and she's throwing it, and she's yelling, and she's tossing it. And then she takes a bottle of beer, and she tosses it. And our guide tells us that what she's saying is, You want to eat something? Here, eat this. You don't need to eat him. Have some beer. Drink that. And I mean, went on for a long time. Don't know if he ever got better.
Oh, oh, but she fed the demon.
But she fed, yeah.
Excellent, yeah.
Right, but that even goes back. That's a really good example of one of the stories from the Torah, which is that every Yom Kippur, the high priest would take 2 goats. He would take one goat, and he would say, "This is a goat for God," and they would sacrifice. And the other one is he would say, "This is a goat for Azazel." Azazel, probably some demonic character, and they would send it off into the desert, giving the devil his day. Go eat this goat.
Right.
Don't pay attention to us, right? And that's definitely part of the Yom Kippur liturgy. That's still right. That we're supposed to sort of keep the Satan, the accuser, busy, so that it doesn't pay attention to us. Right, so that's also in Jewish practice as well. So let's look at some of these topics here. I'd like to start by mentioning some of the magic that was around the rabbinic period. First, I think I should mention these what's called demon bowls, and archaeologists discovered all of these bowls turned upside down in Israel and surrounding area. And they had, if you look on this page here, here's an example. They had inscriptions. There's another example on page 2. I'll show the people at home. If anybody's actually watching. So they would have these bowls, and there'd be inscriptions on them, and often a picture of a demon in the middle. This one is Lilith in the middle here. And they would be turned upside down to trap the demons. Which makes me scared for these archaeologists who discovered these bowls and turn them back upside up and let these demons out. But there's a whole collection of these, and you can look online. There are images of them in museums all across the world. And I wanted to just read through a text of one of them. This is a translated text of one of them on page 1. Does somebody want to give it a shot to read? Anyone?
Okay, I'll do it so we don't want to waste time. Negray, daughter of Dende, and from her male sons, and I have heard, and the voice of the weak. I mean, these are just fragments, right?
Yes, they're fragments, because, some of it was destroyed.
Of raging women who curse and afflict and cause pain. They have descended against them. Yazdun and Yakrun, Ha'el the great, and Rufael and Satil, and seized them, and by the tufts of hair and the tresses of their heads, and broke the horns which were high, and tied them by the tufts of hair of their heads, and said to them, "Remove that which you have cursed." And they said to him, "From the pain of our heart we cursed, and from the bitterness of our palate we resolved to curse. I have made you swear and adjure you in the name of Astai and Yazdun and Yakrun and Prael and the great Rufael and Satil, that you release and free Negray the daughter of Dende.
I think that's a good enough
Male and female from all curses, cursed, and from the curses of the mother, and from the curses of the prostitute.
Right, so,
and from the
all right, we could keep going. We could keep going.
She's on a roll.
You're on a roll now. So we could keep going, but so this is an example of, right, they're trapping the demon. They're trying to take a curse that was on a person and take it off of a person, and this was a common practice in the time of the rabbis.
Everybody is cursed according to this. There's hardly anybody who doesn't have a curse on him, right?
Right? Who are all these people, right?
I mean, really.
Right. So, and this was written in Mandaic, which is a sort of a form of Aramaic, and that's one example. And so let's turn the page now. Here you see another demon bowl.
And this is what it says on the bowl, right?
On the top bowl there, the one that's at the top of the first page. Right? And this, I didn't put what's written in the second bowl, but this is another example, and that's a picture of Lilith in the middle, and presumably it was an anti-Lilith.
Where did that come from? She's not in the Bible.
Lilith is not in the Bible; she's in the Midrash from the rabbis.
Oh, I see.
And the story of Lilith is a very interesting story. Right? The story is that before God created Eve from Adam's side, God created a woman, Lilith, out of the earth as well, just like Adam, and they were both created. And God said, Lilith, you have to be subservient to Adam, and he's in charge. And after a while, she didn't like that, so the story goes. So she ran away. And meanwhile, Adam was very upset because his companion ran away. And he went to God and he said, God, you got to help me out here. And God said, okay, I'm going to send 3 angels. And I kid you not, their names are Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Samangalov. Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Samangalov. And he sent those 3 angels to go and find her and bring her back. And the story goes that they found her on a desert island by herself. And they told her, you have to come back. And she said, no, I'm not coming back. I don't want to be subservient to Adam. And so they told God, and then God said, well, then tell her that she's going to be cursed. So they tell her that you're now cursed to live forever and to have 100,000 children every day and have them all die every day. And then she became synonymous with sort of that evil that takes your children. Right, so because she couldn't have any children of her own, because all of her children died. Right, so the idea is that she would steal people's children in order to make them her own demon children. And so to this day, as Max can attest, right, there are people put anti-Lilith amulets on their children's cribs to keep Lilith from coming and taking their baby. Right, this was their explanation for infant crib death. Right, was that Lilith came and she took your child away. And so this was their way of trying to deal with that. And that's where Lilith came from. Now, I like the version of Lilith that has developed, right, which is sort of the feminist icon Lilith, right? Lilith magazine, and Lilith Fair, the rock concert that they have, right? That Lilith is seen as like this empowering figure. She's not going to be subservient to a man, right? And so I kind of like that revision of the Midrash. But I also I really like folk tales and stories, and I like to hear about the darkness and scary things like that. So,
Do you have that dark feeling of Lilith?
in this particular picture,
Yeah.
well, this picture isn't. You mean the bowl? The bowl?
Chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't have that dark feeling when I look at that. It's kind of a simplified picture, right? But perhaps they made it look kind of silly so that they could dispel the fear of Lilith or something. This is another, by the way, amulet against Lilith. This is from much later. This is a late modern amulet. It says Adam, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, and then the other side it says Eve, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, Bathsheba, and then in the middle it's got this picture here, and then it says Matzpatz, which is it's a permutation of Yud He Vav He, the name of God, put through a certain cipher. So that's one of the things that the Kabbalists would like to do, especially the people who practice practical Kabbalah, is they put the name of God through a cipher, and write it that way. So, and even to this day, if you have mezuzah on your home with an actual real cloth with a real scroll inside written on parchment by an actual scribe, if you look on the back, there's a phrase that if you don't know Kabbalistic ciphers, you won't understand, which says "Kuzu bamuchsaz kuzu," which actually is a cipher of Yud He Vav He Elohim Yud He Vav He. So I want everybody who has an accessible mezuzah. Oh, by the way, I talk about how many of you have a mezuzah on your doorpost?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. So there's a superstition that none of you mentioned. Right. Is it custom or is it superstition? Right. Back to that. Right.
I think of it as a reminder of, oh, right.
This is a Jewish house, or
of God, or well, that's I think the purpose of all ritual is to remind you.
So
that
you wouldn't care if there was actually a scroll in the mezuzah.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't. Right. You talk to somebody. You talk to
I prefer a scroll, but
sure. Right. And a paper scroll is no good either if you're a Kabbalist, or even just a standard, Orthodox Jew, paper scroll. But so anyway, so that's Lilith. That's where she comes from. They say, and she's sort of the mother of all demons.
So what would be the date of this?
This particular one, this was probably, I don't know if I wrote down the date here.
On the side here.
Yes, and there's Lilith on the character there.
Lilith, what, Misod?
Ze Shomrim, Ze Lilith, Ze
Oh yeah, in the middle.
Shendolad Mikol Nezek, or something like that. This one, I think, would probably be like the late 18th century, something like that. I don't know. I could probably find the exact date for you if you're curious. On the next page, we have another Lilith amulet. This one on the top here is from a book called Sefer Raziel HaMalach. And if you see these three figures on the left, that's Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Samangalov, the three angels that were sent to get Lilith and bring her back to God.
Could you please just
Spell those names out? Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Los Angeles.
Sanoi. Sanoi.
Samangalov.
Yeah. And Sanoi. Sanoi. Print and script.
Thank you.
No problem. So, and this amulet is from Sefer Raziel HaMalach, which is a book of magic, Jewish magic. It's kind of a cryptic book. It has astrology in it. It has segulot in it. It has, segulot spells in it. And the lore is that it was a book that was given by the angel Raziel to Adam in the Garden of Eden, and that the book kind of it was passed down from Adam from generation to generation. The first modern printing of it was in 1701, and that's what this amulet is from. I'll just mention one other thing because I was on Lilith. Lilith has a husband, a consort named Samael. And Samael is sort of seen as the king of all demons. If you notice, there's the L at the end of his name, right? Most angels have L at the end of their name. Samael sort of has an angelic quality to him, right? He's sort of like a fallen angel. And that's because El, right, means God, right, at the end of it. Right? So Samael is seen as a very dark character. I met a chassid once who I was talking while I was studying at JTS magic, and I mentioned Samael, and he like jumped and he said, "We don't say that. We say Samech Mem, right? Which are the first two letters. We say Samech Mem. We don't say that word, right? And it kind of reminded me of I actually, Harry Potter hadn't yet come out. I think, or maybe it had come out, but I don't think I'd made that connection. But eventually, I thought about in Harry Potter, they don't say the name of Voldemort, right? Who's the one who must not be named, because there's this idea that it'll sort of invoke him. So those are two of the demons. I taught a whole workshop this summer at the Jewish Renewal biannual gathering on demonology. So I could teach a whole course on demonology, and I could just keep going, all the different demons that there are. But let's move on from demons a little bit, and let's move. Let me just do one or two more things about demons, because I want to prove to Erica that this was in the Talmud. Right. So let's look at page 4 at the bottom. This is from the Talmud, Tractate Psachim 110a. Rabbi Joseph said, "The demon Joseph told me that Ashmedai, the king of the demons, is appointed over all pairs, and a king is not designated a harmful spirit. Others explain it in the opposite sense. On the contrary, a king is quick-tempered and does whatever he wishes, for a king can break through a wall to make a pathway for himself, and none may stay him." Rabbi Papa said, "Joseph the demon told me," right? This Joseph the demon was like a friend of the rabbis. He used to hang out. "Joseph the demon told me, for 2 we kill, for 4 we do not kill, but for 4 we harm the drinker." And the idea is that you would go out and get drunk, and you'd be walking around the street, and the demons would get you at night. And so maybe they're talking about numbers of people who are gathered together, right? For 4 or for 2. For 2 we hurt, whether they are drunk unwittingly or deliberately. For 4 only if it is deliberate, but not if it is unwitting. And if a man forgot himself and happened to go out, what is his remedy? So a man goes out, he's drunk and he's on the street and he forgot, I'm putting myself at the mercy of these demons. What does he do? And this is a spell here. This is a segula. He takes his right hand thumb in his left hand and his left hand thumb in his right hand, and say thus, "Ye 2 thumbs and I, surely that is 3. But if he hears one saying, ye and I, surely that is 4, let him retort to him, ye and I, surely 5. And if he hears one saying, you and I are 6, let him retort to him, you and I are 7. This happened once until 101, and the demon burst." With mortification. That's in solid quotes, though. So that's the interpretation of the translator. Here's another one, Psachim 110a. He who lets blood without washing his hands will be afraid 7 days. He who trims his hair and does not wash his hands will be afraid 3 days. He who pares his nails and does not wash his hands will be afraid 1 day without knowing what affrights him. Putting one's hand to one's nostrils is a step to fear. Putting one's hand to one's forehead is a step to sleep. It was taught, if food and drink are kept under the bed, even if they are covered in iron vessels, an evil spirit rests upon them. Right. So there's one sense.
Don't pick your nose.
Right. Right. There's one sense in which you can read demons as being germs. Right. This was their sort of pre-modern understanding of bacteria and germs. Right. This next one, Brachot 6a, it has been taught, Abba Benjamin says, if the eye had the power to see them, no creature could endure the demons. Abaye says, they are more numerous than we are, and they surround us like the ridge round a field. Rav Huna says, every one among us has 1,000 on his left hand and 10,000 on his right hand. Right? Sort of reminds you of bacteria, maybe a little bit, right? You better get some Purell, right? So those are some examples of demons in the Talmud. And it was a very common practice. And even all the way back to the Talmud, they made amulets against Lilith. They made amulets against all sorts of different demons. But there was always a current throughout history of don't make these amulets. Even Isaac Luria, who was the great Kabbalist from the 16th century, one of the most famous Kabbalists in the world, he was asked by one of his students, why don't we make amulets anymore? And Isaac Luria said, you can't make amulets, and you can't make amulets for two reasons. One is that the tradition of writing these divine names has been sort of lost, and anybody who claims that they know how to do it, they don't really know how to do it the right way, and if you do it the wrong way, you could cause more harm than good. And then the second reason is you have to be completely pure to do these magical things. If not, you can open yourself up to negative forces. You could open yourself up to negative forces that can come upon you. And the only way you can become completely pure is with the ashes of the red heifer, which they no longer have because the temple was destroyed. And the rabbis still had some. So the rabbis in the Talmud could do this magic because they still had some of the ashes from the red heifer. And the ashes of the red heifer purify you from the impurity of coming into contact with a dead body and death. And so he says you have to be completely okay with the impurity of death in order to do any of this. So just an example. I have some more text here about amulets. There's one text you can read later about the Baal Shem Tov. He was handing out amulets and somebody confronted him and he said, you're not supposed to write these divine names down, and how could you be doing this? And he said, well, actually, I'm just writing my own name on the amulets, which could be interpreted in lots of different ways. So that's that one. Now let's talk a little bit about golems.
What is an amulet, actually?
An amulet is an object, could be written on a piece of parchment, could be written, many of them on animal skin, could be on metal. There are metal amulets. And you wear it. You could wear it. You could put it, if it's for a child, right, against Lilith. You could put it on the crib.
Well, it's like today we have the evil eye all over the place. Yes, I understand.
Right. So that's what an amulet is, and it can be worn. It can also be put in a certain place. A mezuzah is an amulet. A mezuzah comes from the tradition of amulets, and it's supposed to protect your home. And you put it on your home.
Hamsa.
A hamsa is an amulet as well. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
You're wearing an amulet right now. There you go. And it's specifically, actually, a hamsa is specifically against the evil eye.
Oh, I have a big one on my
Right.
door.
And often there's an eye. Often there's an eye. There's an eye on the hamsa, right? Because it's against the evil eye.
And next time I'll try and remember. I have this necklace that's this amulet that says Joseph was a son with the fountains, and I forgot all the things, but it was what they put in the river to make his casket rise.
Oh, to make his bones come up so that they could
up.
take his bones back to
I have
Israel.
that on yeah.
Oh, cool. Bring it in. We'll take a look at it.
I'll try and remember.
Right. So I could also teach a whole class about amulets. If you want me to write you an amulet, I could do that. I don't necessarily believe that they're efficacious. Again, it's the imaginary mongoose effect. But if you are interested, I can send you lots of different examples. You could probably also just do a Google search for images of Jewish amulets, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah, when my mother-in-law's red ribbon on the crib be an amulet. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I have a couple of amulet examples here. I'm going to pass them around. People can take a look at them, and these actually have the dates written down. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about golems. All right, so golems are the word golem just means image, right? And in the tradition, a golem is a being that you make out of earth, and you give it life, and it comes to life. That's the most basic way of talking about a golem. It goes all the way back to the Talmud. Again, they say that, first of all, Adam at first was made like a golem, and until God breathed a spirit into him. And now I want to look at a text here on page 5. This is again from the Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin 65b. And the idea is that they used the book, the Sefer Yetzirah, which I told you guys about a couple sessions ago, which has secrets of the Hebrew language and how to create worlds and create things with the Hebrew language. And so they say that the rabbis of the Talmud studied the Sefer Yetzirah and were able to make living beings. So can I get somebody to read Rava said?
Rava said, if the righteous wished, they could create a world. For it is written, your iniquities are a barrier between you and your God. For Rava created a man and sent him to Rabbi Zerah. The rabbi spoke to him, the man, but he did not answer. Then Zerah said, you are from the pietists. Return to your dust.
Any comments on that? Right, so that's the first example of a human being created out of, or a being created out of earth and brought to life.
Who are the pietists?
The pietists, they're sort of the righteous ones, right? The tzaddikim, or and they had sort of special powers, right? I guess that's enough to say. These were the super pure, super holy rabbis,
So Rava is one of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, and the rabbis are kind of all seen as the rabbis of the Talmud are all seen as being able to do these miraculous things. There's another rabbi, I don't think it was Rava, it was another rabbi who created, it says they studied together the Sefer Yetzirah, and then they created a calf out of the earth, and then slaughtered it and ate it. So this idea here is that God created all of creation with language, and that if you're pure enough, you can also learn the language of creation, and you can create with language in the same way that God created with language. And human beings have that power to manipulate reality. So that's another example of a golem. Now, Yehuda Loew of Prague from the 16th century is sort of the famous creator of the golem. There have been plays written about it. There have been stories. There's a book. It's just replete in Jewish literature. Everybody knows about it. And this golem was known as a golem who was sent to save the Jewish people from blood libel accusations in 16th century in Prague. And there's a tradition around that time as well, and later, of golems being created to sort of defend the Jews and save the Jews from bad things happening. There's in the stories of the golem, golem has sort of some very specific qualities. A golem will only do what you tell it to do, and it doesn't really have a mind of its own. So there's a story within the tradition of the Maharal of Yehuda Loew of Prague that he left the golem with his wife, and he said, don't. If you tell it to do something, you have to tell it to stop doing that thing. And apparently she told it to get water and bring it into the house, and then she left it, and it just filled the house with water, and the house was completely flooded by the time that she goes. What's that?
Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Perhaps taken from that legend as well, right? And Frankenstein, right, is another one. There's the thought that because in Grimm's fairy tales, there's a golem story, actually. So there's a thought that Mary Shelley read the story of the golem, and it was partially based on that. There's a great book by Norbert Wiener, who was one of the founders of computers, cybernetics, called God and Golem Incorporated. It's a really fascinating read if you're interested. And he talks about computers as sort of being a golem, and sort of the modern version of a golem. And if it's a fascinating read, and it's actually pretty accurate in a certain way, right? We were able, through the use of language, right, computer programming, which is just language, ones and zeros, we were able to create an artificial intelligence. And not only that, there are robots today that are that have humanoid features that are very close to what a golem was. And so it's one of those things that actually has come true in a certain sense.
There's a contemporary book, I think it's by Breslin, Snow in August.
Yes,
Where,
I know that one. And then there's Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon. Has a golem in that as well.
There's also one called The Golem and the Genie.
The Golem and the Genie, that
I
was a recent one, that came out a couple of years ago. Right, so the golem has kind of captured the human imagination as one of those really intriguing ideas. There's another book that I read, and I forget the title, but it was a book that was written about 10, 15 years ago, talking about all sorts of different things as golems. So it talks about corporations as golems, right? And this idea that corporations are people, right? This whole political idea that corporations are people. And he has a chapter on corporations sort of are one version of a modern day golem. Like we created this fictional person, and that actually has an effect on the world. And so there are many, many, many different ways of looking at the golem and how the golem actually exists in the world. I have I have much more to kind of go over, so I just want to allude to some of this stuff, and you can go home and read it. There's a story here about how during World War II, when the Germans occupied Prague, they fined the golem in the Altnashul, which was the synagogue of Yehuda Loew of Prague. So there's that story you can look at, and several other stories about golems there. Now I'd like to just talk a little bit about, unless anybody has any questions about golems or anything I've talked about so far. No? Okay. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about some other features of Jewish magic. First of all, the Dybbuk, which is, I'd say, the golem maybe is the most famous character from Jewish magic. The Dybbuk maybe is the second most famous. A Dybbuk comes from, the word Dybbuk comes from the root Dalet. Dalet Bet Huf, which means to attach something. Devek in modern Hebrew means glue. Devekut is a mystical word, which means a word from Jewish mysticism, which means to attach yourself to God. And a dibuk Dibuk is an evil spirit that attaches itself to your spirit. And there's a famous, wonderful Yiddish movie called The Dybbuk, and I think it was a silent movie. Maybe some of it's silent and some of it's spoken, but it's in Yiddish. It was made before World War II. Black and white movie, and it's called The Dybbuk, and it's about this woman who falls in love with this man because their parents had arranged a marriage between them before they were born and said, if you have a boy and I have a girl, but they forgot about it. But then she finds this guy and she falls in love with him, and they want to get married, but then the parents won't let them, and he goes and he dies. I don't know if he kills himself, I don't remember, and then his spirit inhabits her. And it's sort of a possession narrative. And so the idea is that the Dybbuk will come in and they'll muck around with your life. And it's different from a demon, right? I talked a lot about demons. A demon is a sort of supernatural character that was never really human. A Dybbuk was a person who lived, but now they died and their spirit comes back to haunt you. And
not in a good way.
Not in a good way. But there actually is, in Jewish folklore, another concept of the Ibor. And Ibor comes from the root of to be pregnant in Hebrew, pregnancy. And Ibor is seen as a good spirit that comes and attaches itself to you and helps you. And so, like, if you ever feel like your grandmother's there with you, or and it's like somebody's looking over, somebody's watching out for me. That's the idea of the Ibor in Judaism. It's this spirit that attaches itself to you to look out for you, to help you. So the opposite does exist. It just has a different definition. So that's Dybbuks. And I want to tell a little story about just about the dangers of magic. This comes from 16th century. So in case I inspired any of you to actually practice magic, I'm gonna tell you this story to keep you from doing it. This story comes from 16th century Tzfat in northern Israel. And it is a story about a Kabbalist named Joseph de la Reina. And they say that Joseph de la Reina lived in Tzfat in the late 15th century, late 15th century, early 16th century. And the text that tells the story is supposedly written by one of his disciples and was supposedly found in a cave. And the story goes that he was the greatest Kabbalist of his generation. And he knew the Kabbalah backwards and forwards. And he was a Baal Shem. He was a practical Kabbalist. He practiced Kabbalah Masit. And he could do magic. And he could bring down angels. And he could do all sorts of spells. And so he decided, he got it in his mind, he wanted to kill Samael, the king of the demons, end the reign of darkness on this earth, and bring the Mashiach, and bring the Messiah. And so he got 5 of his disciples, and they fasted for 3 days, and they called down with a spell Elijah the prophet, Eliyahu Hanavi. And Eliyahu Hanavi comes down, and Joseph de la Reina tells him this whole plan. He says, I want to kill Samael and bring redemption and bring the Mashiach. And Eliyahu Hanavi says, why do you want to do that? It's not up to you, it's not up to you to do this. And he said, well, it's not for my own sake. It's for the sake of the world. It's for the sake of the Shekhinah and the Kadosh Baruch Hu and all of this good stuff. So please tell me how I can do this. And Eliyahu Hanavi says, well, I don't really know, but I can send you to an angel. And I think he sends him to Sandalphon, which is one of the angels. I can send you to Sandalphon and tell you how to bring down Sandalphon, and Sandalphon maybe could tell you. And so he says, but Sandalphon is going to, when you see an angel, like, they're really intimidating and really scary, so you're going to faint. You're probably going to faint when you see Sandalphon. So I'm going to give you some frankincense that you can sniff to keep you awake, that you're not going to faint when you see Sandalphon. And he gives them a whole magical procedure to bring down Sandalphon. They fast for 3 days, they immerse themselves in the mikveh, they do these incantations, and they bring down Sandalphon, and Sandalphon comes down, and he sniffs the frankincense because he's like fainting, and Sandalphon says, what do you want? And he tells him the same story. And Sandalphon again says, why do you want to do that? And he says, it's not for me, it's not for my own selfish needs, it's for the sake of the world and the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it's not for me, it's really not for me. And so Sandalphon sends him to another angel, and the same thing happens with another angel, and they go to like 3 or 4 angels. He does this whole process, until finally, one of the angels, I think it's Michael or something, says, okay, here's what you do. You take some chains, and you inscribe these magical words on these chains, and you say this specific spell after you fasted and all of this for 3 days, immersed in a mikveh, and you'll be transported to the dark mountain. And once you're at the dark mountain, you'll see 2 black dogs, and these black dogs are Lilith and Samael. And you need to take these chains and put them around the necks of Lilith and Samael, and then take a knife and kill them. And you'll bring the redemption, but just be careful, because don't talk to him, don't let him talk to you, don't let him say anything to you, because he can trick you. No, he will trick you, and make sure not to worship him in any way. That's straight out, because that will give him all sorts of energy, and that's idol worship, and you're sinning, and that'll give him power. So they do this whole thing. They go down to the mountain. They wrap the chain around Samael's neck. And they're about to kill Samael. And Samael says, "You're about to kill me. Can you just do me a favor and just give me a little sniff of your frankincense?" And he gives him a little sniff of the frankincense, and that is avodah zarah, idol worship. Because he's lighting incense for a foreign god, for another power. And so Samael gets all this power, he breaks the chains, he throws Yosef de la Reina and all of his disciples all around the world, and Yosef de la Reina, they say, ended up in Akko, and he ended up going insane and living above a synagogue in the attic. And they say that he was turned into a dark Kabbalist, and he would bring the queen, de la Reina of the queen. He would bring the queen of, I guess, Spain or whatever, to his house every night. He would make an angel come and bring her, and he would, not do good things to her, and so eventually they say that the king, she figured out what was happening, and she said, there's this Jewish guy who lives and somehow I end up in his house every night, and so he says, and so the king comes and he says, turn over Joseph de la Reina or I'm going to destroy the Jews, and then Joseph de la Reina, it's a very sad story, ends up jumping off a cliff and dying. Killing himself.
And that's why we shouldn't do magic?
And that's why you shouldn't do magic.
Oh.
So the idea is that no matter how pure your motives, no matter how pure you think you are, that it's dangerous and there are dark forces that you can invoke. That all being said, we are all rational people, and we know that when we say Kanahara or that we do these things, that it's actually just a way to calm down our lizard brains, our amygdalas. Thank you all. I went over by about a minute. I'm sorry. And I'll see you all. I think the next class is in several weeks. So I will send you all an email about after Pesach. I'll send you all an email about the next assignment and everything. And enjoy these packets. There's some really great sources in there.
Thank you.
Thank you.